If you were to ask 1,000 dubstep fans to name one element that defines the genre, I think you'd find they'd all agree. Nothing is more synonymous with dubstep than the wobble bass. So in the next several videos, we're going to pay some serious respect to the wobble. We're going to build wobble basses using various soft synths, and also take a look at the infamous talking bass. To kick things off, we're going to start with Logic's built-in ES2 soft synth, a stalwart go-to synth for dubstep producers everywhere. I've already loaded up an ES2 here, so let's open it up and take a look. The ES2 is a powerful hybrid synth, and by hybrid I mean it blends subtractive FM and wavetable methods. It also has some pretty extensive modulation capabilities, which makes it even more attractive to the wobble bass enthusiast like myself. We want to start out with a blank or initialized patch setting. Luckily, the factory preset settings include several. Under Tutorial Settings, select Analog Saw Init, which, as the name implies, is a single oscillator sawtooth setting. Before we do anything else, let's set the ES2's keyboard mode to mono, here, since we are making a bass sound after all. We'll keep to a single voice for now, but we'll probably switch to Unison later on for a fatter sound. We'll change oscillator 1 to a sine wave and add in some FM, and take the pitch down to -24. Sounds pretty dull so far. Okay, so next, turn on oscillator 2 and select sine again. Now this is where it gets interesting. Right click here to bring up a list of digi waves and select ring 1. You'll probably want to experiment with the various digi waves since each one gives wildly different results, but for now let's stick with ring 1. That's sounding better, but of course we still need the wobble. So let's go to the modulation router and set that up next. We'll select filter 1 and 2 cutoff as our target and LFO 2 as our source. Okay, now we're getting some wobble, but we need it synced to the tempo, so we'll bring the rate slider on LFO 2 down to 1/8. Much better. The filter's not quite right though. We'll switch to filter 1, which is set as a basic low pass, and take the cutoff down a little, and reduce the resonance. I think I'll add some overdrive as well, add some dirt. Almost there, let's take the modulation intensity down just a bit. Great, now we're getting somewhere. Sometimes I find adding sub-bass helps fatten the sound somewhat, so I'm going to bring oscillator 3 to the party and use it as a sub. We'll set it to a sine wave and take the pitch down to -12. In the oscillator mix, set the balance between oscillators 1 and 3 to about 75-25. And we should start to hear that sub-bass underneath. Perfect! There's a couple more things we can do to grunge it up some more, the first of which is to simply add a little distortion at the output stage, here. Set it to soft and crank it up. Great! Now we can also modulate the pitch on oscillator 2 to get some extra grungy harmonic distortion. In the second column of the modulation router, we'll set the target to be pitch 2 and the source LFO 1, and bring up the intensity. Sounds pretty awful right now, doesn't it? Okay, so take the rate of LFO 1 up to its highest setting and bring the modulation intensity down. Now that sounds pretty grungy. If we wanted to, we could also have this controlled by, say, the modulation wheel. Just select Mod Wheel in the Via pop-up and set an intensity range. I think it's finally time to turn on Unison and stack those voices. I'm going to stick with 6 voices in this case, which I think's plenty. Lastly, I like to hear a bit of glide between notes, so I'm going to turn up glide here to about 100 milliseconds. Perfect. Now that's a mean sounding wobble bass. Now for the ideal wobble bass, the rate of the wobble will vary on a note by note basis. There's actually several methods to accomplish that, and I'll be covering them in more detail in a later video. But for now, let's make some more bass.